I'm Grace Pedota, and I am with Canadian Securities Exchange, and I am doing an Instagram live with Ivy Zmuda. Is that how you say your last name? Okay, wasn't quite sure. And Ivy is the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at Tantalus Labs, and it's actually Ivy's birthday today. Happy birthday, Ivy.
Thank you.
No ticker. Tantalus is private company, right? Not public yet? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So why don't you get started with kind of talking to us a little bit about, your how you started in the cannabis industry and to what your career is now as the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at Tantalus.
Sure. So basically, it's kind of hard to say when the career actually started because I'd been a patient for a while, and that led to tweeting about it, and that led to this very confusing category of person called an influencer, which has kind of gotten some negative publicity in the last little while. Uh, so basically doing that, and then I had inquired with some people I knew at other LPs about jobs. It was always kind of lukewarm kind of thing. So then I was just really frustrated with that. And one day I DM'd Dan Sutton, the CEO of Tantalus, and I was like, hey, I'm going to send you a resume. And he was like, okay. So how that worked out was he said, you have a really great background, but we're not looking for that right now. And 3 months later, he DM'd me again and said, yeah, we just lost our security guy, so we're going to fly you out here for a job interview, et cetera, et cetera. So that went well. I got the job offer actually as I was laying in a hospital bed getting my gallbladder out. So that was an interesting experience.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, having to like email Dan and say, yeah, so I kind of got to get this surgery done. If you could like wait for a couple of weeks, it's like, I probably get that done before you come here. And I mean, from there, within the Cannabis Act and the regulations, I mean, regulatory affairs was pulled from pharma, and cannabis is often improperly slotted into pharma, but it is what it is. And security are only part of the regs, so it was just kind of natural. Combined with the fact that being a patient who had gone through 3 different medical programs, I mean, there wasn't a lot of good education put out by the government, so you had to kind of learn the regs on your own. So that just kind of led to me knowing the regs really well. And then taking over, dealing with the regs for the whole company, with some recent developments like our sales amendment for edibles, extracts, and topicals. That was kind of a big project. Yeah, so it just kind of led to everything naturally.
That's cool. That's really cool. And so you mentioned like social media. So you're kind of a big deal on social media, mostly Twitter, which I kind of like for my generation, I missed the boat on Twitter. Like I just didn't catch on to it. I'm such an Instagram girl. It's just my thing.
For the longest time, I was like, Twitter is dumb. Why is this a thing? You're like tweeting the small things at a time, and then you just kind of click, oh, it's like a live feed of what's going on in the world. So yeah,
Yeah.
I was anti-Twitter for the longest time.
Yeah, but now you're like pretty big on Twitter. So how
Pretty
has
big.
that is that your preferred like social media platform?
I guess, yeah, like I do post on Instagram. It took a while to kind of figure out where the line is with content as far as, Instagram's visual, obviously, and Twitter's text, more or less. But, there are some visual parts to it too. Yeah, I think Twitter is just better for like a live kind of pulse with trends, and Instagram is more for like curated content, whether it's like personal, I went to the beach, check out this awesome framing I put together, curated or business curated. I mean, same thing.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like how has social media kind of like has it advanced your career in any way or like helped you out with that, especially in the cannabis industry?
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of almost lucked into doing the whole live tweeting thing, and just on a whim one day, I was supposed to meet Adam Greenblatt and Jamie Shaw to hang out, but they were busy. So like, oh, I'll go watch a panel. Oh, this is kind of interesting. I should tweet about it. I did it once on my phone, never again, because that's completely awful to do on a phone. And it was just the boom time, and Twitter was the social media of choice. So it was really the circumstances and the timing that led to it kind of fueling the promotion of the personal brand and kind of using that to kind of ride it into business opportunities.
Yeah, it's because you kind of like you provide commentary and like journalism on drug policy involving subjects on cannabis and psychedelics. So that's good. That's really good. How like that's are you still tweeting about that kind of content, or have you geared towards other kinds of content?
Yeah, so I mean, the whole COVID thing has been good for kind of reducing what it costs to go to conferences.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I guess like probably now focusing more on psychedelics because there's just less cannabis content now because it's boring and it's been legal for a while, and psychedelics is like the new thing.
The new
Uh,
thing, the new happen
but
thing.
oh yeah, yeah.
I wore my
Like,
tie-dye shirt for you today.
oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
I got it in Tofino.
Oh, nice, nice.
Yeah. I went and lived out of like my friend's van for like 2 weeks, and we went down to Tofino, and yeah, I don't think I'd ever do that again.
Yeah, it's a once per life kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, yeah, I'm 28 now. No.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So now just switching gears to kind of talking about diversity and inclusion, and still staying on the topic of social media. How have you seen dialogue change on social media around diversity and inclusion? And if so, like how has it changed from maybe like 2, 3 years ago?
Yeah, so it's good you mentioned the actual time period. Like, I think in terms of how it's changed, I mean, it's just become more normalized to talk about it, and you see more companies talking about it now. I mean, it's definitely shifted towards BIPOC and what they face as far as the situation in the U.S. with George Floyd, and I think that's really good.
Yeah.
But I mean, kind of talking about dialogue on social media is kind of the problem with it in that, we've had dialogue for a long time now. Like the tech industry went through this like many years ago, and it's kind of a more mature version of what's happening now with some of the drug policy related industries. But I mean, with all that dialogue, we still don't see representation at the C level. We still don't see representation on boards, even just for women, period, never mind people of color. So I think that it's important for that dialogue to happen, but we really need a commitment from companies to bring these changes forward, and that it's not good enough anymore to just say, well, we try and integrate diversity into our hiring practices if those people are going to be shut out of the forums where the decisions of the company is actually being made.
Yeah, no, exactly. And for those of you who've just joined, I am doing an Instagram live with Ivy Zmuda, who is actually, it's her birthday today. And she is Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at Tantalus Labs. And just shifting the conversation a bit, you recently came out as transgender. And I'm just wondering what has that journey been like for you?
Sure. So I'm just going to find my notes here. There we are. So, I mean, having a very public profile and like, unfortunately, being known as a public figure, I was told recently, there was no halfway, right? Like within the trans community, there's, people go stealth, like they'll kind of work towards it. Some people may never publicly come out. So it was a big decision to decide to do it because like there's no halfway. And I still think I might not have done it were it not for COVID, just because it offered that kind of buffer, and it was kind of like, well, the world's kind of being upended and changing, so I might as well be like authentic and not, continue this charade more or less.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I mean, publicly, I've gotten quite a bit of support. There's been no negative comments really, except the usual Twitter trolls. But I mean, we progressed to the point where that's not okay to do in public anymore. So I mean, it's not realistic to take what happens in public and say, we passed Bill C-16, it's over with. Trans people are treated the same as everyone else because they're not. Yeah. And for me, like in particular, I mean, I'm probably like the biggest princess of this industry in cannabis and Twitter, so I'm treated very well, and there are people who don't have that same situation. So
that's good. That's good to hear. And I guess that was that led me to my next question, which was like, how have your like family, friends, workplace kind of embraced this new journey that you've taken on?
Yeah, so I mean, on the personal level, it's been all good more or less, and the workplace has also been all good. I mean, due to COVID, I'm pretty much working all from home now, so I haven't, I don't think, really gone through
Hmm.
like as much as a public reveal, like not on social media. So I think that's kind of yet to come still. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's all been positive on that front, and like Tantalus is pretty big on diversity and supporting employees, whether they're gender diverse, neurodiverse, whatever other personal situation they might have. So I'd say that it's all been good for sure.
Nice. That's good. And what kind of like perspective can you bring, or like what kinds of things are that Tantalus is doing um, that can kind of like provide a model for other companies as to kinds of things to support their employees with inclusion and diversity?
Yeah, so I mean, at the company level, what we're working on right now is kind of a way to integrate diversity and inclusion into the entire company, and also looking at kind of open sourcing it so that we would be able to share part of that or all of it with other companies, because I think that it's a big undertaking, and like money's tight across the industry, so not a lot of companies might be able to invest in that. So as much as we can do that and also make it standardized, because it's really bad to have like 200 different companies all doing their own thing. And if you're a worker in the industry, you should have some confidence that you'll be considered the same at any company you go to work for, and those standards have evolved for other more mature, I guess, aspects of the workplace. So as far as personally, I guess, having transitioned, I've been both subject to, what men say when women aren't around, and now kind of being fully, I guess, accepted as a woman by my female peers to kind of hear what they don't feel comfortable saying around men. So I think it's a really good kind of broad level view of the whole picture, which I think is maybe what's missing. It seems like sometimes it's very adversarial, and might be one group against the other, and I think it's
Mhm.
better to consider it as a whole kind of thing.
Exactly. And I know that like in other panels that you've kind of sat on, you've been pretty active on a lot of panels lately. You had mentioned a company's code of conduct. So what is the difference between a company's code of conduct and a company's code of ethics?
Yeah, so I mean, a code of conduct is kind of a new name for the employee handbook. It basically says here's what is acceptable at this company, and here's not, and gets procedures in there too. And a code of ethics, I mean, it's more of a general statement of what the company stands for and how the company should behave in every situation, versus the code of conduct is very specific. So I think both are important, that you need the code of ethics to deal with anything that might come up. So, here's what we believe in with this new thing that just came up. But you also need the code of conduct to give employees expectations. Like, this is what's going to go on, and this is what you need to basically be okay with if you're going to work for us.
Yeah, no, exactly. And what kinds of things do you think that that should be added to a company's code of conduct to include diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, so I think before I dive into that too much, I mean, we have to understand that you also need your culture to align with the code of conduct. Like, much like C16 hasn't fixed everything for trans people, putting a paragraph, don't misgender people, in your code of conduct isn't gonna do it, kind of thing. But just things to like what you should do is you should talk to those people at your company, or if they're not there, get them there, but also talk to those people in the community. Like, what do you want in there? Like, what is gonna make you feel safe to transition, or like what problems do you have right now? But things specific to gender diverse people, such as here, ask someone's pronouns and don't do certain things, and fully accepting non-binary people, if those are some folks that you're going to be working with.
Yeah.
For people of color, I mean, obviously I don't have that experience, so I also don't want to speak for them, but just kind of kind of understanding that there are situations that may feel safe to the company that may not feel safe to them, and just getting their perspective. And like, I think companies should put money into this. Like, it shouldn't just be, we're going to do this and we're not going to like invest in it. But there are tons of things they can do in terms of having dialogue and giving people of color a voice that don't cost any money. But yeah, like, just getting perspectives from those people and integrating them into your policies.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's good insight. And you had mentioned as well, like, a lot of this doesn't just happen within the workplace. Especially in the cannabis industry, we're going to conferences, and this could happen outside of the workplace. What kinds of support systems should be put in place for employees, do you think, and what would they look like to you?
Sure. So I'm going to find my notes on that as well. Yeah. So I mean, with our industry, it's kind of less of a thing now going to conferences because the boom's kind of behind us. But I mean, harassment goes beyond just showing up to work. I mean, like, I don't want to mention names on this because I don't want to give platforms to the bad actors. But there was recently a situation where a woman working for a LP was basically stalked and harassed by one of the stock people on Twitter. So, I mean, you really need to have that in your code of conduct and have a playbook and develop that support. I mean, I think it's just getting your peers to call it out. That's kind of a common thing with diversity and inclusion. That's not just enough to say you support someone. Like, you have to, when your peers are behaving badly, you have to let them know and take that discomfort. And I guess connecting those employees to organizations or consultants, like maybe bring in anti-harassment consultants one time and have them write something for you, and then it's going to be there for your people. But you can't just put some boilerplate in and think that's going to cover everyone. Especially in an industry like this that's not really mature, you're going to find people doing things that they wouldn't get away with in tech. Like, they would never be able to show their face again in tech, and it kind of happens regularly in cannabis and psychedelics.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's a good leadway into psychedelics. So is psychedelics the new cannabis industry? If so, why and how?
Yeah, so I think the answer is both yes and no. And I mean, anyone who checks my blog, I've written on this recently. I mean, it is in that the attention is there from both the people making products and companies, and also from the people funding them. It is in that, unfortunately, we see a lot of the same negative things happening. I mean, a company recently brought on Tony Clement, who fought against Insight, and he's now going to be one of the first people profiting from the drugs he hated previously being legalized. Also, I mean, we're just going to see more public company. It's going to be different in that it's more based on the big pharma model. Mm-hmm. It's more well-defined regulation, because cannabis was always, oh, well, it's a drug, so it has to be pharma. But I mean, MDMA is a synthetic substance. It's going to fit way better into pharma and, the counseling medical framework. But the way it's not is that, there's not going to be direct demand. Like, people who take mushrooms and LSD now, I mean, even if they microdose, it's not every day. So there's not going to be that same open profit greed rush to rec, because rec is a long way off. And it may only be decrimmed. It may never be legalized, because of what people have seen happen with legalization in Canada. And equity is way easier to do when it's decrimmed than when it's legalized, because once you get legislation written, like, good luck on changing C45 in a big way in the next 10 or 20 years. So I think it's going to be different, and hopefully that will let us fix some things that went wrong with cannabis.
Yeah. No, and what interests you the most about the industry?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that cannabis had the most transformative potential, but psychedelics does have quite a bit too, just in terms of overall drug policy. We can get away from some of the less good elements of big pharma in terms of, like, antidepressants that we have to wait weeks to take effect versus the rapid acting ones in development on psilocybin. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's going to help us really tap into a lot of disorders and conditions and categories that we just haven't been able to. 'Cause I mean, these really impact the mind.
Yeah.
And for example, gender dysphoria it's something that like there's not a med for. You can't give someone a pill and their gender is suddenly back in alignment with their biology.
Yeah.
Versus psychedelics which are helping with PTSD for veterans. I just saw a news article about them helping with eating disorders now, a new study. So, I mean, that really interests me to really address the mental health crisis and we're going to have a huge one after COVID because PTSD is going to be like huge after COVID. And yeah, like, and I'm really most excited that despite everything I just previously said, that we are seeing equity being at least considered upfront versus just forgotten about.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I had read somewhere as well, it was like, I think one of your blog posts that psychedelics help with gender identity and transition. Like, what would that look like in the future, do you think? Would that be some sort of like program or what?
Yeah, so I think with that we'll have to proceed carefully because trans people do have a problem in general with accessing healthcare. I mean, it's really good in BC, but in other parts of Canada and the US, it can be really hard to get past those gatekeepers. But I mean, once we do that, I think if we create a framework and take people like me who have been through it and who have found that help and actually create some therapies, because what I found is that it deals with anxiety really well, even for a short time. Like it's not a fix, I guess, but it helps you kind of see what's at the end of the tunnel. And the freedom I feel now versus all the anxiety and stress I felt beforehand, you know, is wonderful. But if I wasn't ever able to get a peek at that, like you have to go through so much to transition, and some people don't have supportive environments, that I think it will help people maintain that transition and not just give up because it might be really hard. So I think we have to tap into therapy, find out the best substances, and it's a lot of kind of feeling it out as we go. But at the end of that, we could definitely create some sort of protocol that would help people make that transition.
That's amazing. And what would you like to achieve in the psychedelic industry? Like, what if you could make your mark or kind of do something? What would it be?
Yeah, so I think a couple of different things. I mean, first of all, hopefully increasing representation for the LGBTQ community, because I also find that queer perspectives just in general in the cannabis industry in general in business aren't really considered. So something like that. Also, I mean, and doing the same for BIPOC people. Like, not that I am one, but obviously I can be a good ally and try and elevate their voices wherever I can, and help really make the medical system better for trans people, maybe through what we'll do with psychedelics, just to make it easier, because, you know, trans people have so much to deal with, like having, like, there should be a document they can look to and, okay, these are the steps.
Yeah.
And I guess also influence policy and regulations. We have a chance to change them before they get awful, or make good ones before they get awful.
Yeah.
And also, like, keep doing what I'm doing now in terms of facilitating transparency and knowledge with the general public. I mean, people, I think, don't even know that much about the regulated cannabis industry, and that's why there's so much negativity. I mean, if they knew what producers had to go through, and, oh, this is why it takes 3 or 4 months to get a new cultivar to market. It's not just you decide one day. And I guess overall, just to do what I can, you know, now that I'm in this position, to make sure it's not a repeat of the worst things about cannabis.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, that's great. And happy birthday again. Thank you so much for coming on this live with me on your birthday. I feel like
no, for sure. I mean, it's been like a lot of months and at least one gender ago that I talked to you, so I was good on that too.
Yeah, no, I'm so happy that we could reconnect, especially over a live, and I'm so happy for you and your journey that you're going through, and yeah, I'm just really happy for you. So yeah, and for those of you, this is Ivy. Zmuda, Vice President of Regulatory Affairs at Tantalus Labs. And thank you so much for joining us. This session will be on YouTube, CSC_TV, and it will be on Instagram on IGTV, which our handle is Canadian Exchange. We just changed it. So thank you so much for everyone for joining me and Ivy this afternoon. And happy birthday again, Ivy.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.